is Richard Collins. I am the Managing Director and Founder of CSR Accreditation, the UK's only accreditation body for social responsibility. Today we are running an event called the Future Shape of Social Responsibility Forum, and this is in line with World CSR Day. Throughout the day we have 4 sessions, the first one being the environmental session. At 12:30 we have the environment session, and then later this afternoon we have the community, and then finally the philanthropy session. So I'm going to hand over now to our host, Muriel Boulet, who will introduce the panel and run the rest of the session, and I'll pop on at the end to say thank you and farewell, and encourage you, if you haven't done, to sign up for the other sessions. So I will drop off this and hand over to Muriel to introduce the panel and say hello. Muriel, it's over to you.
Good morning all. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to talk about the environmental aspect of CSR, and we have a panel of practitioners, experts, gurus that have been involved in everything environmental for quite a long time. So a lot of experience and wisdom to be shared this morning. I'll start with Mark, who is director at the Green Organization and has been awarding businesses for a couple of decades now with Apple Awards for the good that they're doing for the environment. Then we will be hearing Chris, who is the doer, the making it happen and providing tools for businesses to do better for the environment with Prolectrics. Then we will hear Ed, who knows everything about carbon footprint and will tell us more about it. And finally, Phil, who has been involved in saving the planet for quite a few years and will give us a view on how it can be done. So that's the panel we will hear this morning, telling us about what works in terms of being involved with the environment from a business point of view, how to improve your impact, and also tackling where the challenges are. Because as we all know, goodwill is the first step, and good effort and good action resulting into positive impact is the next one. So I'll hand over to each panelist who will tell you more about themselves first. So over to you, Mark.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Woollands. I'm a director of the Green Organisation. My background is in engineering and technology, particularly in fields of foodstuffs and environmental management. Our work at the Green Organisation is predominantly around recognising and rewarding environmental and CSR efforts of communities and organisations around the world. We started in '93, and the CSR Awards started at the turn of this century. So far, we've awarded more than 20,000 organisations for their efforts. As a small organisation, that's us, with just 5 full-time members across 3 separate locations. We're not giants of CSR projects ourselves, but we have built up a significant knowledge base over those last 20 years. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Over to you, Chris, with Prolectrics.
Thank you, Muriel. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Williams. I'm the Managing Director of Prolectric. Prolectric is a technology or product development company that have brought to market a range of temporary and permanent solar lighting and power solutions that typically work in the construction sector. My background is I've been in environmental businesses for the past 30 years, ranging from main board director of PLC through to essentially starting a new business in just after 2010, 2011, which was essentially bringing technology to market. My background is in bringing technology to market in the environmental space. That's Prolectric, and I'm really keen to present some of the experiences that we've had as I guess a classic SME in the space as to what you can do, what is available to do to reduce our impact.
Thank you very much, Chris. What about you, Ed? Tell us more.
Yeah, morning. Thanks, Muriel. Happy World CSR Day, everybody. My name's Ed Packshaw. I'm the MD and founder of Cludus Carbon. I'm a sustainability and CSR specialist working in the sector for about 10 years in a whole range of different areas, from conservation and charity to international education and the UK construction sector, and now run my own consultancy, which is focused on helping SMEs get a good benchmark on their carbon footprint, and helping schools do the same, and trying to make it easy to understand, create measurable changes, and implement a culture of sustainability across the company. So very excited to be here today, and looking forward to a really good chat.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. And finally, but last but not least, Sir Phil.
Thanks, Muriel. Yeah, thanks, Muriel, and the team at CSR Accreditation for putting today on. It's a great event and a great chance to talk about some really important topics. So my name's Phil Clark. I'm founder and director of Consume Limited. We're an environmental consultancy helping organisations to really understand their environmental impacts, the risks that a changing environment poses to them, their dependencies on the environment, but also how to take really impactful, purposeful action. So we work with companies of all different sizes, from global companies, listed companies, down to micro businesses, helping them with environmental footprints, as we've just heard, is a really important starting point, but then going through to look at strategies and targets, net zero, that sort of thing. And some of the practical things around policies and procedures, and even in sort of the purpose of business, and looking at B Corp status and helping companies on that B Corp journey. As Muriel said, I've been doing this for a long time. I did my degree in environmental studies back at the end of the 80s, which makes me feel very old. Meandered through some industries, spent 5 years or so running the environmental team for Capgemini, which is a big multinational company, and then last 6 years running Consume. Super.
Thank you very much, Phil. So now let's, now that we've got an idea of who is talking today and the background that you all have, maybe we can tackle what is the topic for this forum today, is to explore the environmental aspect of CSR, and what it means for a business to commit to do good for the planet. Looking at what has worked well and the challenges also that a business might face in the endeavor. So if you want to start, Mark, with the overview that you have on the multiple businesses that you've worked with. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So things we've seen working well particularly is tying up in, this is probably more on the community branch, but tying up with schools and particularly getting trees in the ground. These are the sorts of things that just, there's nothing more important to do really than to plant trees and inspire the next generation. So certainly those have always scored well as far as entries into our awards are concerned. And I think as a footing, those are good places to start. Easy, high gain. And also as far as business goes, these are generally very good on PR front as well. So they can be a win in every respect.
Okay, and in terms of what you see as challenges for businesses to in the environmental endeavor?
Challenges we've seen and experienced ourselves is you need to be seen to be doing these things. You need to have the word out there. So a good organisational structure with the backing of marketing and management. And we do it ourselves. We're literally judging hundreds of organisations every year. We need to be seen to be doing the same sort of thing. So we respond to environmental disasters like tsunami relief and earthquakes and mass exoduses from various countries. We do what we can to help out there. And obviously we ourselves need to operate as environmentally consciously as possible. So we started moving away from paper marketing, which was obviously the big thing last century and at the start of this century. Long before that became a bit of marketing fail, really, an own goal. And we do all sorts of recycling, and we help other people with their recycling efforts as well. We had a good one a couple of years ago, the London Underground system, TfL. They changed all the handrails on the escalators in the Underground. Doesn't sound like a big job, but actually it came to about 1,300 miles of unrecyclable rubber. We managed to find an outlet for quite a large amount of that going to marinas. So it creates the buffer strip around the edge of where you would park your boat if you were lucky enough to have one. So they were getting it for virtually nothing. It was getting fully recycled and having a second life. And, 1,300 tons of, miles of rubber adds up. So that sort of thing, avoiding landfill, got great PR for TfL, got good PR for us, turned a few heads. And it just shows what thinking outside the box can do, especially when you're tying it all up between organisations. So that's where we see our strengths, and where the whole CSR ethos is demonstrably saved quite a mountain of landfill.
Absolutely. And I think what you've highlighted here, Mark, is the fact that Seacon stands and is standing for collaboration.
Indeed.
Because without collaboration, this rubber story wouldn't have happened. Thank you very much for sharing.
No problem.
Over to you, Chris. What is your story about the environment, and how is it translating into actions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Muriel. So I guess the questions that were posed was around the benchmarking area. What's been working for us as a business to start off with. So I guess the first thing as an SME in this space is to have a baseline to measure yourself against. I think if you don't have that, there's no starting point. And I think what's really been working is to put that benchmark in place, put that baseline in place. And I have to say the CSR accreditation that we went through in 2020 helped us with that process, helped us gather the information to allow us to measure against going forward. That's been hugely helpful, both more on an operational sort of carbon footprint basis. That's what it's been helpful with. What we also do as a business is we measure our performance on how we bring our technology, low carbon technology, to market, and the uptake of that technology. Because what we're trying to achieve is a transition from, in our space, a diesel generated area into lower carbon solutions. So we measure our performance on how much diesel have we saved throughout the 12-month period. So that becomes a sort of measurable indicator for us, both in terms of what we are lowering as far as carbon emissions, as far as diesel usage, but also how our business is growing. So that's been very useful to sort of set the baseline as a starting point. Now, we do all the usual things you'd expect businesses to look at when you're looking at your own impact, and that is things like PV on our factory roofs and so on and so forth. We did that a number of years ago. We typically generate around about half of our energy usage is generated through our solar PV, saving us. We're probably saving around about £8,000 to £10,000 per year with that. So it's not just the sort of the carbon footprint and energy usage. It's also there are serious cost savings that can be achieved with understanding your energy usage and trying to reduce it. So I guess if I had to summarize all of that, the key point is start with finding out what your baseline is, and then measure that against that going forward, and all the points in between and all the other panelists here can help in that process, I think, in terms of understanding what your starting point is. So I guess that's the area that's what's been working for us as a benchmarking. If we're moving on to what are the challenges, I think that there are still some challenges out there when you've got industries that you're working in that have been so used to using certain technology for decades that it does become difficult to try and make that shift. So in the space that we occupy, we've kind of been a little bit of a disruptor in the market space. And when we first introduced the technology, so 3 or 4 years ago, that was essentially solar battery solutions in the UK. It won't work. That was kind of the typical response that we would get. You know, we've got sort of the tried, tested and proven model now, that as the direction of travel with low carbon solutions is only in one direction, companies are being forced by their investors, by the consumer, to continue down that path. It's become easier. It's become easier because there is a drive towards low carbon, but it's also become easy because we've also got a suite of tried, tested and proven solutions. Mm-hmm. So that was a challenge, but it's becoming easier. I think the other challenge that we're seeing as a business is the rate of growth. When you're in a space, in the low carbon space, then we've been fortunate to see our business grow quite rapidly over the past 3 to 4 years. The consequence of that becomes the challenges around growing businesses, so funding, HR, all the sort of things that you would typically see within a growing business. We're experiencing all those challenges. Nice though those challenges are, they are still challenges. And so, you know, those are the main challenges for us. We think we're going in the right direction. We've got a great team, but it's a challenge trying to maintain the culture of an entrepreneurial spirited business as you've got these challenges that you're faced with. So they're great challenges to have. We love being in the space that we're in. We love making a difference in terms of the reduced carbon, the reduced use of diesel. At this 2020 saw that we were reducing carbon by 15,000 tons of carbon, 15 million kilograms of CO2 was reduced with the use of our technology. So we're really, really proud that the technology is having that impact in the spaces and the sectors that we're occupying. So yeah, challenging, but really exciting at the same time.
Well, sounds quite impressive actually as a number, Chris. Thank you for sharing. But I think, you know, the growing part of, you know, in what you were saying is people don't come and work with you, you know, by chance. You know, more and more people want to engage with businesses that are making a difference. And I think that would help to maintain the culture of, you know, doing good for the planet, for sure. Thank you for that, Chris. Over to you, Ed, because you know, carbon is your field. Tell us.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear those sort of real world cost savings from Chris and his business now, because it shows that value of benchmarking going forward. You know, and I think when you sort of look forward, benchmark and to wonder, you know, how do I use it? What's the difference between TCFD and CPD and all sorts of SECR and a million different things? It can get quite overwhelming quite quickly. But a benchmark just gives you that one number. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of carbon footprints. It's a simple, quite communicative number. There's not that much jargon that needs to be explained around it. People generally overall understand what that carbon footprint word means. So it's a useful one. But I mean, there are lots of different ways to do it. And I think sometimes people get a little bit sort of wound up in all these different regulations and things like that and realize, you know, well, where do I start and what do I do? And offering a benchmark with some carbon footprinting or even something simpler than that is a really great place to start and getting an idea about what you do and what you don't. I think for me overall, the idea of benchmarking starts with the whole company saying, look, we know that there are some negative parts to our organization. We're not perfect. You know, Jane Goodall said that everything we do on this planet has a footprint. It's up to us to decide what mark it leaves. And I think that's a really good way of explaining it. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a negative part of your business. It's true of every business on the planet. It's about admitting that there are negative parts and trying to minimize them as best you can. You know, we're not trying to save the world here with small businesses, but collective action does have a big impact. So I think benchmarking gives you that starting point, and actually, you know, you don't need to leap all the way forward to a carbon footprint. You know, I think that's where the 4 pillars of CSRA comes in, and its true value. You know, it just creates a really simple, understandable, bite-sized framework, which means you can just go through some of the areas and very, very quickly have a good understanding of what you're doing well and what needs improving. Similarly, the Sustainable Development Goals, creating an SDG framework is also a really good way to set up some kind of benchmarking. But I think overall, what's really important is you get the values right. And I think, continuing on with that benchmark throughout a long period of time, keeping it consistent, keeping the measurements consistent is how you get the results that Chris is looking at now. And that for me is the difference probably between good environmental management and a bit of lip service. You do a quick environmental check or a carbon footprint or whatever and send out a bit of communication to people, and that's lip service really. If you keep doing it year on year, keep reporting, keep reducing, then that's good environmental management. So it's important that the benchmarking happens. And I think as well, things work well when businesses ask themselves why they want to do this. As I said, it's not about saving the world, it's about reducing and minimizing your negative impact. But it's also okay to admit that you want to see the cost savings that Chris is talking about. You want to do better in terms of your environmental performance. And there are loads of benefits that come outside of that, not just in cost, but also in health and safety and the happiness and well-being of staff that touch on all the other 4 pillars as well. So I think there's a lot of big benefits for it that can be really, really accessible to any business of any size. But it starts with a good benchmark. It starts with a good understanding and also kind of letting go of that idea that there's this huge, overwhelming problem. And so I think that there's great value in that. I also encourage people, and I think it's been touched on by Mark and Chris already, to really consider the value of good communication and top-down communication. The value of a senior figure in the company standing up and saying, "We're doing this. This is how it works, and it's good for us and good for the planet," is a great place to start. I think many of us on this panel and probably some of you in the webinar will have experienced that feeling as a kind of middle manager in the environmental sector, desperately trying to convince your boss that this is important, who's got to try and convince their boss and their boss and their boss. So when it starts from the top, it really does set a good standard. So either if you are a CEO or encouraging CEOs to really make that statement. I think nowadays we see the value of it really, really well. But there's a lot of benefits in creating that top-down communication.
And in terms of, so that would be the final challenge that you want to highlight really, Ed, is convincing exec that is the right route to engage in.
Yeah, I think for me, alongside that, keeping going consistently is a really, really big challenge, and unless you're seeing the numbers come out, it can be difficult. Environmental management systems, they get harder and harder each year. You've got to reduce your footprint each year. So once you start to see those gains year on year, it can get easier, but often, really kicking off and keeping going can be a big challenge. So you have to be quite convinced of doing it. But there's huge value in creating good, clear values, good communication, and all of that starts with a good benchmark.
And I think also with those numbers, if you start integrating them, alongside your financial review to assess, the health of the business and to make decisions, then it becomes very powerful. And it's not something that is run in parallel, but it's really part of the day, the way the business operates on a day-to-day basis. No, I agree with you. Thanks a lot for that, Ed. Over to you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you. So we've heard lots of sort of really interesting insights there from the sort of the practitioner insight from Chris, and I love that story about TfL reusing waste and bringing a second life to products, and they're the sorts of things that we need to increasingly look for in the business world. And very much echoing what Ed said about the importance of footprinting and benchmarking and that business case. So perhaps that's where I'll start. So I think we are here to save the planet. I think if we know we're in a climate crisis, we know we're in an ecological crisis, we're in serious trouble. And if we don't take action, all of us, whether that's in our home lives or our business lives, the future looks really quite bleak, depending on which story you read in which news outlet. And I have to say there are days where I do feel quite concerned and depressed. You know, I've spent a lot of time in this industry, and the rate of change that we're delivering is just not fast. And the COVID pandemic of the last 12 months or so has really highlighted some of the wider sustainability issues, the inequalities within the system, and how there are just many disadvantaged groups. What it's also done is kind of hide climate change from the headlines for the last year. And I think our job as sustainability practitioners and businesses that are concerned about this is to, you know, take all the action obviously we need to around the pandemic, but look at the lessons learned from that and look at how we can drive change and build that into our businesses, with sustainability being a key driver. I've been an advocate for many years of audio conferencing and video conferencing, and been told that you just can't run a business over that. We have to go and have meetings. We have to fly around the world. There's nothing we can do about it. And it's been interesting to see how businesses have been able to adapt so quickly and so efficiently over the last 6 to 12 months in terms of pivoting their business to working much more efficiently in an online way. And I'm not saying we won't travel. You know, there's no real substitute for meeting people occasionally, but this has shown us the art of the possible. Faced with an unimaginable crisis, we've been able to do something different, and we've been able to keep our businesses running. And we need to use that lens, I think, with more aspects of sustainability, and rather than accept, no, that can't be done, it's too hard, it's, well, why can't it be done? You know, 5 or 10 years ago, would TfL have gone and looked for a partner to help them recycle all of that waste? Companies like Elvis and Cressy, if you don't know them, they're a superb company. So they make products out of fire hose. This is a notebook. They make lots of luggage and all sorts of things. They take all the fire hose from London Fire Brigade and turn them into products. So that avoids waste to landfill. So I guess to me, there in the really important thing is for businesses to change the way they think. So sustainability, as we've heard and as we know, can be really confusing, can be quite overwhelming, can be really complicated, but it doesn't have to be. So as Ed said, you know, you can start with some benchmarking, which could be something fairly simple. So looking at where do you spend most of your money, because that's probably quite a simple clue as to where your biggest carbon impacts are. So have a look at your Sage system or whatever you use, Xero or QuickBooks. Where do you spend your money? What happens to that money? Could we do something different with it? And that will give you an element of benchmarking around your footprinting. A great step is to work with someone like Ed or myself or many others, or some of the free online tools that are out there, to calculate a simple footprint and understand what that is. But in doing all of that, it's looking at what are my most material impacts. Back in the day, I've seen a lot of companies focusing on recycling paper within their businesses, which is a great thing to do, but they're failing to act on their most material impact, which could be their energy use or their business travel or something really significant within their business, which is sort of slipping beneath their radar. So I've been working with a company recently where we've done some benchmarking, we've done some footprinting, and what's that showed across a 200-person business is that they were very focused on LED lighting projects in their office, which is great, but I could show them that was only sort of 5 to 8% of their carbon footprint, whereas nearly 80% of their carbon footprint was their business travel, which they hadn't really thought about. So now we're helping them kind of unpack that and focus on how they can drive down impacts there. But we've been able to work with the board of that company to really help them think about their purpose. So they're building engineers. They know an awful lot about energy efficiency in buildings, but their clients are asking for very traditional solutions. They're now starting to re-educate their clients to ask different questions when they're putting bids together. You know, how can we make this the most energy efficient building it can be, rather than ask me to come up with the cheapest building I can build? Because through different types of measurement, different types of benchmarking, I can demonstrate that over the whole life of my building, the cost will be lower. It might cost me more to build it, but it's going to be lower running costs now, and increasingly as our climate changes and becomes hotter in the summer and colder in the winter and more variable, you know, we need buildings that can adapt to that, rather than building something traditional now, which is really hard to change in the future. And that applies to all of our businesses, everything we do. So I've been working with another business recently that travel is a major part of their footprint. They're about to move to a new warehouse, and we've helped join the dots with them to look at, by understanding the numbers, that they have a large fleet of field staff that go out, but they also have a large warehouse. So we're looking at the some of the numbers and the metrics that say, well, if we put solar PV onto that warehouse, you can then use that to power, and probably some battery storage, you can then power your fleet of vehicles that your field staff are using. So again, really looking at your most material impacts and driving that change. But again, that comes back to that first point of knowing what those impacts were, developing some sort of benchmark at a carbon level or a social level. So tools like CSR accreditation are great for that. So it's an easy way to see where you're positioned against other companies. And having been involved in judging processes with CSR accreditation, I can assure you that we look very carefully at what people put in, and we're expert in spotting greenwash, so we can make sure that companies that are doing the right things get rewarded appropriately, and we can provide feedback through to those companies where they can do a bit more and where they can move up the levels. And there are lots of other sort of schemes out there that would allow you to do that. And if I haven't said it already, materiality. It's that sense of, do the things that really matter, not necessarily the things that are easy. Hopefully they'll overlap, but not always the case. So in terms of challenges, I haven't been checking how long I've been talking, so Muriel will just wave if I'm saying too much. Do you want me to stop? No, okay, so wave if you do, because I can, you know me, I can chat about this all day. I think the biggest challenge, particularly for smaller businesses, is there is always something to do, something else to do, which is more important, more urgent. There's always a really important client issue, a really important employee issue, a pandemic, something that's going to distract you from taking the action you want. And I hear so many businesses say, I really want to do this, but I don't know where to start. I can't start. I would say the most important thing is to just start. I've talked a lot about materiality, but do something. Start to engage your employees, start to engage your customers, start to, think yourself about, particularly if you own the business, what do you want your legacy to be? Is it that you've been a highly profitable business, or is it that you've been able to be a highly profitable business, but you've also delivered some really good things along the way? And maybe you've adjusted your business model to focus on purpose, and that's meant perhaps a bit less profitability, but you've done more of the things that are the right things to do. And you've helped inspire other people. You've helped drive change within your industry. You've helped make yourself a bigger and a better and a stronger business because your employees recognize you're the sort of company they want to work for. They're telling their friends that, you want to come and work for my business because they've got a really good handle on environmental and social sustainability. They know where they're going, and I'm proud to work for them. And we're going to increasingly see that. There's a lot of data out there that particularly looks at the millennial generation saying they want to work with purpose-led businesses that can articulate and they can be proud of and they can talk to their friends about in a really positive way. So I think that's really important. In terms of communication, I think, as Ed touched on as well, the really important bit is to make sure you're clear and you're open and you're honest and you're transparent. There are very few businesses out there that are 100% green, and any business that claims to be, I'd be quite suspicious of. We all do have a negative impact. And it's okay to not know all of the answers, but say to people that, we're on a journey. This is what we're focusing on at the moment. We know how we can make change. We don't have all the answers. We want your help. We want your advice. We want your guidance. We want to work with you to drive a better ecosystem within our industry and leave a really positive change. So it's hard. It doesn't have to be too hard. Crack on and do something.
Amen. Thanks a lot, Bill. That's brilliant. That's I think for me, the emphasis in what you're saying is transparency, talking about what matters. Yeah, saving paper sheets is very important, but maybe that's not the greatest thing that you can do. Absolutely. And I think, Ed, you mentioned in previous conversation, if people can play with, the online carbon footprint calculator and compare individual footprint between 2019 and 2020, that would be quite an eye-opener. I must confess, I've done it myself, and having stopped being on a plane every week has made me look quite good from a carbon point of view. So it's all about, where your impact is. But again, it's a team effort. it's a team effort because you want new ideas. It's a team effort because it's hard, and it's a team effort because that's how we do better. It's nobody can tackle this huge issue on its own, and it's an effort also between businesses that we've been talking about, non-profit organization, and public services. So it's a collective approach, definitely. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I forgot to mention at the beginning of this chat that we welcome all questions on the chat button from all the attendees, so keep on typing, people. But I know that Jenny has been reading frantically what was coming through and will help us maybe answer some of them right now. Over to you, Jenny. Jennifer?
You hear me?
Barely.
Can you hear me now?
A bit better, thank you.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions coming through on carbon tax. Does the panel have a view regarding whether FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, and indeed any products should have a carbon tax applied? That's the first question. And a similar question, do you think that the UN Sustainable Development Goals resonate with your business, and how?
Okay, so shall we ask Ed to tackle the carbon?
Maybe we can split it up if you want, Phil.
And then Ed on the carbon tax, and then we'll tackle the SDG maybe with Mark.
Yeah.
So shall I go on
first, Phil.
Fine, I'll go first since I'm talking. I think yes. I think what we've seen is that there are a lot of people that will do the right thing for the right reasons. Sadly, not everyone will do the right thing for the right reasons, and we need market measures and interventions often from governments to drive change. So two examples being when I was at university, the big worry was the ozone hole, and legislation came in to ban CFCs, propellants and aerosols and fridges and things like that. And over the last couple of years, we've seen articles saying that the ozone hole is now closed up as a result of that market intervention. Carbon taxes are another efficient way of doing that. And one of the fundamental problems we have, part of the reason we have the crises we face, is because business don't have to pay a lot of the negative externalities of things they do. They get to dump products into the environment for free. So if we start to charge for those externalities by putting a tax on carbon, more of a tax on water, we then start to identify the true cost of a product, and products that are seen as organic or green or environmentally friendly that are sometimes seen as more expensive become less so, because you're really looking at the true cost of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with Phil. For me, short answer about carbon taxes, yes, it'll definitely happen. If you look at the 2050 net zero plan that the UK has, some of the green bond systems that Rishi Sunak's put in, and going forward, it really will happen. And I think it's just the start, as Phil touched on. There'll be water and waste, polluter pays principle, and all sorts of other systems that will come in place, basically that make people more accountable. I fully agree. The moment it becomes financially responsible for an individual or business, then we can start driving that down in a positive way. In terms of the SDGs, for me, I think that they're a really valuable framework for any business and a good starting point. You can also use the CSRA 4 pillars of accreditation as well as maybe a second step. But for me, you can grab the SDGs, there are 17 of them, and just the best way to use them is just to go through each one and decide whether your organization is directly affecting that or interacting with it or not participating at all. So if you're a plant business like one of my clients, obviously life on land is going to be a large part of how your business interacts with the environment, with the land and things like that. So you're definitely having an impact on life on land, the creation of sustainable cities and communities as well. But there are some other things that might not be part of it. And once you've gone through each of the 17, you'll probably have 4 or 5 that you're directly impacting, and 4 or 5 that you have some influence over but don't really control. And there is your SDG framework. You focus on trying to minimize in those 5 areas and trying to affect positively where you can through volunteering, charity, donations, offsetting, schoolwork, all sort of things like that in the other areas. And there was a question, how do you convince senior board members or managers or things like that how to get involved? That's a great way to start. To say, listen, I've done a quick framework. I've written it down on a piece of paper. I think we should do the following 5 things. And that is a good thing. You can put that up on your website, and that's a great place to get started.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Thanks. And yeah, the key message here is, SDGs, there's 17 of them. Don't try to tackle them all. Yeah. Go on where you have the largest impact. We're going back to what Phil has been saying. Where does your money go? That's where you're going to make the biggest difference. Most definitely. I wanted, Chris might have something to say about this as well, and I wanted to hear Mark's perspective on the matter. If we could do 1 minute each, that would be fabulous.
I probably won't take a minute. I think as far as the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN, for us as a smaller business, sort of classic M of the SME, they just felt a little bit too complex. So what we found much easier to implement within the business was the 4 pillars approach, where we're using the 4 pillars, which was much easier to look at, to review, to start the process. Now, as the business grows, then we'll be looking at other frameworks that might be more beneficial and more suitable for us as a growing business and a larger business. But we're classically sort of 45 staff members, so we're right in the middle of that SME group, I suppose. And the simpler model of the CSR accreditation process was far easier for not just the senior management team of the business to understand, but also the rest of the business as we were trying to present the benefits of what we were trying to do as a business. Doing good is good business. It all seemed to be much easier to present with the 4 pillars approach rather than the Sustainable Development Goals.
And Richard has developed quite an interesting matrix actually to connect each pillar with the SDGs that I'm sure he would be happy to share, just for your information and the information of all the attendees. Over to you, Mark. What's your perspective on this?
And you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and they are beautiful. They are hippies' dreams and they need to be all of our dreams. If you were to look at them as a CSO, you would see pound signs, 17 big pound signs. And that's probably, well, it's definitely the wrong attitude. We've shown time and time again that anything you do to improve the well-being of the people you work with, the people you work near, in your community, the place you work, it all ends up saving money or making money. Now, in the last 5 years, this sort of global approach has taken a hell of a kicking, honestly. We've had the likes of recent elections in America, well, not so recent, that have shown a trend globally away from globalism, and we really need to be joined up. So it is more of an uphill challenge now than it was maybe 5-10 years ago, but we have more of the tools. And I think it's just an attitude thing. It's trying to get people to say, do you know what, I'm going to have kids, they're going to have kids. Let's try and keep a roof over their heads. Let's not worry about what neighbouring countries are doing. Let's all worry about what neighbouring entire communities are doing, and all pull together. None of this stuff is going to apply to everybody. But of those 17 goals, which are purposefully vague, so they do fit people, and then you can get down into the nitty-gritty for your own industry, there's so much to be gained just from changing attitudes, getting people on board, showing how it can make you money or save you money. And I think people need to get their hands dirty and really mean it. And it's getting quite critical now. But honestly, sorry to be pessimistic, I see it getting harder as well as more essential. And I think we need a PR drive in this quite significantly.
Thank you, Mark. And I think in what you said is, it's, business responsibilities, but also us as an individual to share our conviction and our tips and, what you do and, you know, influence others in our immediate circles to do better. Because I do believe in the power of, you know, the pebble in the pond, yeah? And you have your rippling effect. So definitely it's our responsibility. Yes. Jennifer, any other questions that we might tackle with this gentleman?
Yes, there's a question from Kirsty. What green jobs do you think we need to be driving now to truly build back better? And a question from Hugh. Why are we still installing gas boilers in new homes?
Can I take the gas one and give it to Chris just to have his perspective on the matter? Chris, you're on mute. What's your perspective on the gas boiler situation?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Why are we still installing gas boilers in new homes?
I guess it comes back to the sort of position that we found ourselves in as a business, because that's what's always been done, and that's kind of the nature of it's like the story about the tanker ship. You know, we're as a society, we don't switch things quickly. It takes a long time to change things, and it's a societal change that's needed as much as anything else. We all know the technology is there to do it. It doesn't need to have gas boilers around every new build homes, but that's the way it's always been done, and that's the challenge for us as practitioners, to try and make that change quicker.
Absolutely, yes. What are you doing this? Because we've always done it that way, which has never been a good answer for anything, really. Thank you, Chris. Phil, what's your perspective on this green jobs question that Jennifer told us earlier? Maybe Jennifer can repeat the question.
No, that's okay. I think that's quite a tricky one. I mean, just going back to the gas thing, I think there's that overlap with the market mechanisms as well, and particularly in the planning framework. You know, it's bonkers. We know gas is a problem. The Committee on Climate Change has been signalling gas boilers being phased out. Developers want to build the easiest, most profitable, cheapest houses they can build, and people need cheap houses. But you know, we need changes in the planning framework. So just say, you know, don't put new gas boilers in. There's no point. You know, the technology is out there to replace it. It's not rocket science anymore. So we need those mechanisms to drive it. Green jobs, yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think there's a really interesting concept called just transition, which is the sense that we talk a lot about we have to stop doing certain things. We have to stop mining for coal. We have to stop the highly polluting industries, but without thinking enough about, well, that's great, but we're going to make millions of people employed in that process. So Germany and other countries have signed up to this concept of just transition, which is kind of, we'll leave nobody behind, and seeing that as a really positive way of encouraging change. Because one of the reasons, you know, some of the issues in America with Trump and promoting coal mining, that's because people are scared to lose their jobs. So if we can show people a different future, you know, yes, the coal industry is going to go, but did you know that in America we're employing, you know, many more people in renewables than we employ in the coal industry? So helping people understand that, you know, we can help them. They don't have to be afraid. They're not going to lose their jobs. They're not on the scrap heap. That's such an important part of winning that hearts and minds and encouraging change. So incentivizing organizations that are trying to innovate and tackle some of those different problems, whether it's a move away from a fossil fuel, whether it's a move away. So I saw a question from somebody else was talking about the external impacts in far-flung countries where minerals are being mined to power our phones and our laptops and all the rest of it. So looking around that innovation, you know, where can we develop and deliver the solutions we need that don't have those unintended or unexpected consequences, and incentivizing jobs in those areas and encouraging people to do that.
No, I agree, but I also think, Phil, that there's an element of looking at our education system and also, you know, moving the education in towards, you know, feeding into those green jobs, you know, making sure that people are providing with the right skills so that they can engage in those new jobs, which I think is part of the concern as well. Chris, you want
sorry, just one last point on that. I think it's also not just thinking we have to create green jobs. It's that we have to reimagine the jobs we're doing today.
Yes.
To make them different. So I saw a question from somebody else, I think. I can't remember where I was going with that, but it was talking about just rethinking what you're doing. Oh, that's right. It was as a single person SME. So your footprint as a single person SME is very small. So your power, your environmental superpower, your social superpower is to probably spend what money you spend with different types of companies. So look at, what do you spend on stationery? What do you spend on energy? And start to use more purpose-led businesses that share your environmental values and social values, and then go and talk to your clients about that. Talk to your network of associates. I'm doing these really good things on the environment. You could do them too. So you can probably have more impact through that advocacy than some of the direct things you do as a business.
I agree. Thank you. Chris, you wanted to add something to that.
The only comment I think I would make on green jobs, I guess I'm probably a little bit more optimistic in that as I said earlier, the direction of travel here is a low carbon economy. That's what we're having to go and where we're going to get to, and it's going to improve all the time. Green jobs will be a result of that economy shifting from where it is now to a lower carbon economy. And I think that would be, companies are driven to produce, to innovate, to bring new technology to market. The consequence of that is there will be job creation on the back of it, linked to the green economy.
Thank you. And it's all about linking people with those new jobs. I think that's what we're saying. Ed, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of touching a little bit on what Phil was saying, and we're looking at a general movement towards more jobs in the green sector. That's going to happen as we start to increase things, but also we don't have to rely, necessarily on the creation exclusively of new green jobs in new technology. Everybody on this call has an environmental function in their job in some way or some part. You have an impact on the environment in the work that you do, whether you're marketing or head of finance or whatever. So the way I believe it, in the most practical way, is actually to consider, how does your job get greener? How can you green your financial structure and plan for the future for environmental offsetting? How can you market the green benefits of your organization better? How can you put your carbon footprint front and center on your website? And making your job greener is a really practical step forward, and goes back to some of the things we were saying earlier about thinking about sustainability and CSR as something that fits through the whole company. And I love what Richard always says is CSR is your profit. Social responsibility is your profit. And I think that's a really, really good way of thinking about it. So if you connect that to your own day to day, then you will get better in terms of your environmental and social impact.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ed. I think we might have time to tackle rapidly, emphasis on rapidly, gentlemen. One more question, Jennifer.
Yeah, this is a question from Lewis. Are CEOs generally receptive to this? How do you go about reaching out to CEOs to start this top-down conversation and engagement? And related to that is sort of the cost of CSR and return on investment. How do the panelists feel about that?
I think Ed has given us already some element of answers. Phil or Mark, who wants to take on that one?
I'm happy to, but I've said a lot. So if Mark wants to dive in, I'm happy to follow.
You go first, sir.
So I think CEOs are often very responsive, but sometimes it's the language. So often if I'm talking to a board of directors, as an environmentalist, I know what outcome I want, but we can be talking about the same potential project, but I can talk about it in 3 different ways. So to one person in the room, I can be talking about a carbon agenda or a green agenda, because I know that's the bit that's important to them. To perhaps the company secretary, I might talk about the risk aspect. If you don't do these things, you run the risk of being prosecuted. If you don't do these things, you run the risk of losing business. And to the financial director, I might talk about simply the cost savings that could be achieved by doing a certain sort of set of things. Ultimately, it'll be the same thing. I want you to understand and reduce your carbon, but I can articulate that message in different ways that pull different levers and encourage people to change. I think my sense is most people want to do things differently. I was only talking yesterday to a CEO of or MD of quite a big business, and we had to be honest, a fairly boring conversation talking about carbon numbers. Really important. We needed to do it. Wasn't very exciting. What really got him excited, he said, "We're moving to a new office premises in 2 years' time, and I've realised that we've got a small strip of land next to the building that we can do something with, and I want to turn it into a nature reserve, and I want to do something good for biodiversity, and I want my staff to be able to go there at lunchtime." And just his change in tone, he got excited for the first time in a call. And I think that's where talking about sustainability can take us. And the more you can get people to connect as an individual rather than a CEO, the more I think we'll get success.
Yeah,
absolutely. Good. Yeah. Anything to add to that quickly, Mark? I think unfortunately it's about time for us to wrap up.
Yeah, just to more or less echo what Phil says, really. CEOs, they're sort of human too, apparently. And yeah, if you can convince them that, okay, the less green option might be cheaper now, but it won't be in 10 years. When that money's long gone, you will then have those 10 years of savings. And that's almost always the case. So long-term view, basically, it's essential, obviously, as regards the environment in every respect. But if you're persuading people who hold the purse strings, then you need to let them see the bigger picture. It's good on PR, it's good on profitability, and it's good for the future of the company, their own sustainability as well as ours. And that's what it's all about in the end, I think.
Sorry, can I just add one comment there, Mira? And quite often the lower carbon solution can be the cheaper solution. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cost more money. And I think that's the one point I would make. Financial sustainability is equally as important, because you have to have financial sustainability to deliver the carbon sustainability going forward as a business. But it doesn't always cost more to provide a greener option.
Without profit, you can't do good. I think that's quite simple. Well, thank you very, very much, gentlemen. It's been very informative, and I'm aware that there's plenty of additional questions that we haven't managed to tackle today, but I'm sure we can find a way to answer them separately outside of this webinar to the people who have posted them. I think the key messages are, yes, it's going to be hard, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't start. Look at where you are so that you know where you're starting from. Don't do it on your own. There's plenty of people around you that have started before you that can help you. I think the panel here will be very happy to give you a hand on your journey. Yes, it's a group effort. It's a group effort. Together we can do something. On your own you can do something as well, but you'll go a bit more slowly. So that's the conclusion for today. Over to you, Richard. Thank you very much.
Muriel, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Phil. Apologies, Muriel, because I forgot to introduce you at the beginning, forgetting that I was meant to do that. So, for everybody, Muriel has a passion for social responsibility that started with food and where it originated in food manufacturing, took her around the world and made her aware of the importance of taking care of the planet and its inhabitants for future generations. Muriel runs an organisation called Be Otherwise and asks questions to help you build a sustainability strategy and action plan that is right for you. So hopefully that readdresses my inability to introduce Muriel at the beginning. So thank you very much. There was a couple of little points. Carol talked about what can I do as a single person, as a small business, especially with regards to environment. And obviously the 4 pillars provide that great receptacle in which you can look at what you're doing. And in the environment, you can look at how you travel, simply turning computers off at night, shutting doors, recycling, using Zoom to have meetings. I mean, there's loads of things, micro things you can do, but they all add up. The key takeaways, I think, from today, and it's been referred to by all of the panelists, was about how, about benchmarking what you're doing. Without benchmarking, you can't measure, and without measure, you can't see impact. So, I think to encourage people to benchmark what they're doing, measure what they're doing, show the impact, and then communicate that to everybody. James talked about that kind of, where does sustainability take away from profitability? And Ed pulled back the fact that we actually think that social responsibility for the future is your profit. It is about that social return on investment, creating engagement, improved productivity, better mental health and well-being, and working together collaboratively and collectively to build a better world for future generations. So I think the thing is, the future shape of business will be definitely measured in social value as well as financial value. So please do go on to our website. We've got a great resource page. There's a brilliant downloadable interactive mapping of where you are on your CSR journey. We have the next lot of training, which is training, one-day training course over 6 weeks that encourages you to be CSR enablers for your organisation. And of course, we'd love you all to have a look at the CSR accreditation. You can register and get some really great information on that. So thank you ever so much for everybody who participated today. And thank you again to the panel and our host for what was an excellent hour. Thank you very much.